where you're calling in from today. I see a couple of chats already on there. Lee Taylor, good to see you. Karen, Bill Taylor, where are you dialing in from today? If you could just put that in the chat, that would be perfect. And then we'll wait for a few more people to join, and then we'll get underway. Banbury, Lee, just down the road from me. It's a good point, Bob. There's a lot of controversy over that right now. And Bill from San Diego.
Maybe, mate, if I rustle up my head, do you think I could do a...
No, Bill, I'm not at all. For those of you who do know me well, and you wonder why I'm talking slightly weird, I had an emergency dentist about an hour ago, and it's still just wearing off. So please bear with me. My wife just brought some water in, and I'm thinking I probably shouldn't try that because it could be a bad thing. Greg from Hampshire, hi. An old customer of Mentor Group. We'll just give it one more minute, everybody, and then we'll get underway with today's agenda. And again, thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. And Bob, you're in Reading. Welcome. So anybody who's just joined, please put in the chat where you're joining us from today. And we'll get underway in about 30 seconds. Phil from Banbury. How you doing, Phil? Karen from Minneapolis. Welcome, Karen. Good morning. A not so sunny beach in Essex, Tony, I can imagine. So, team, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're calling in from. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us on our first webinar for now around pipeline. Is your pipeline fact or fiction? So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to be talking about some of the principles of pipeline. If you've been on a Mentor webinar before, you'll know we want to make it engaging. We want to make it two-way. By that, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your best practices, things that you've done around pipeline, because ultimately what we're trying to do here is give you some insight, give you some ideas that's going to help your organizations and you if you're an individual contributor seller. That's our end in mind over the next 45 minutes, to give you some ideas that's going to help build your pipeline into more of a fact-based pipeline that's going to drive performance. So today you're going to hear from three people. You'll hear a bit from me now and at the end. You're going to hear from our Mentor Group CTO, James Barton. James is waving. He's going to talk, and I'll talk about where he is on the agenda in just a moment. And you're going to hear from our head designer and consultant, John Phillips, who's going to talk a little bit in the middle of the webinar. But we want to make it two-way. So we're keeping an eye on all chat. We're keeping an eye on any questions that come in. So let's make this as interactive as we possibly can. So let's get underway. First of all, talk about the agenda. There's 3 points on our agenda today. We're going to talk firstly about the principles of high-performing pipeline management. And I wish I'd considered these agenda points before I went to the dentist this morning, because that's probably the hardest thing I've had to say all day. We're then going to look at where should your focus for action be, because that's really important. In managing a pipeline, we've got to make it progressive as we move forward. And then the third one, how do we systemize this? Because we know if we do something on a repeated pattern of practice, then we get really good at this. But let me start off with a question. And put this into the chat, if you will, please. What percentage of salespeople are estimated to be pursuing poorly qualified leads? And this is really pertinent to what we're going to cover off today, because, of course, if you're pursuing poorly qualified leads, then that's often going to make your pipeline more fictional than fact-based. But also, it erodes a lot of time in what we do day in, day out. So we've got to make sure that we are minimizing that if we can. So what have we got on here? Tony 75. We got I think that might be a typo there. Bill 65. Jack, you're saying 65 as well. Dylan Patel, Peter Krause, you're saying 75. So you're all in the right ballpark. The actual figure is 65. So let's think about that for a moment. 65% of salespeople are pursuing poorly qualified leads. Now, what's the impact of that? Well, actually, that means we erode a lot of time on one hand in pursuing leads that may never come through. But on the other hand, we've got a pipeline which could potentially not allow us to hit our target because a high degree of those are going to fall out. So as we go through this webinar today, we'll talk around some best practices to try and minimize that as best we can to give us higher degrees of performance. So let's talk a little bit about what's some of the impacts of a fictional pipeline. And of course, we don't want a fictional pipeline. The 5 you can see on here are some of the outcomes, some of the impacts of that. And if I can just drill into a couple of those for you and talk about the so what. Firstly, poor forecast accuracy. There's a great stat that we've been talking about for some time now that if you play roulette, you've got a better chance of success than the average chance of success on forecast accuracy, which if you think about that is really quite disturbing, isn't it? So if you go to Vegas or you go to a casino, you got more chance of winning on a roulette than you have on your forecast accuracy. We want to change that. We want to try and turn that round to make forecast accuracy as good as it can possibly be, given the constraint that we have in sales. And of course, there's always market factors that will affect that. Another one is impact of supply chain. You know, it's in the media every day at the moment that supply chains are under pressure. So if you're an organization that is reliant on your supply chain for your customer and your forecasts are wrong, you do one of two things. You either create too much or you create too little. Either way, the net impact is going to be on the customer. So some of these impacts of a fictional pipeline are very real. They really do. They affect you as a seller. They affect leaders. They affect businesses. And most importantly, they can sometimes affect the customers as well. So let's just keep those in mind as we go through. Here's a few more external stats for you. The average lead to cash length, the average sales cycle is 102 days. So if you think back to 65% of salespeople are pursuing poorly qualified leads, if you clean your pipeline up, it can then take upwards of a quarter to get good quality back in your pipeline. That's quite a lag that many organizations can't actually manage to cope with. 24% of forecast deals within your pipeline will go dark. Now, we know you can never win everything. But actually, if you can give yourself the best possible chance by focusing on the right deals, so you've got a good quality pipeline, that's going to help us all as we go forward. And then 67% of lost sales are a result of sales reps not properly qualifying customer potential. So if you step back and if you look at your top 3 deals that you've got in your pipeline today, can you confidently say that you understand the customer's reason for change, the reason for change now, and why your organization would be able to fulfill that change? If no, it's okay. That's a gap. And we can go away from this call and go, actually, I need to do some more activity to take that through. So just some early provocation from me around the importance of having a fact-based pipeline. So what I'll do now is I'll hand over to James, who's going to talk about some of the principles of high-performing pipeline management. James, how are you?
I am well, thank you very much. Better than you. Hopefully I speak a little bit clearer than you.
Hopefully I've been clear enough, hopefully.
You've been very good, Matt, and well done for braving this through even without a tooth, which is very good. And I hope the water's working well and you have delivered it well. So great to meet you all. My name is James. I am the CTO here at Mentor Group. Been with Mentor Group longer than I can possibly remember. Hopefully I'll be able to give you some real insights about some of the principles of high-performing pipe management. Matt, would you go next slide, please? There we go. Okay, so let's start off with some basics. Sales funnel ratios. So sales funnel ratios is all about how we focus on our funnels. And we speak a lot about shoving more stuff in the top to get more stuff coming out. Apparently, you might have some problems with my audio quality. Matt, is it a problem with my side?
It sounds, a bit staticky, a bit choppy, as Lee said.
Should I try and change my headset?
I think we can hear you. It's staticky, but we can hear you. So I think in the interest of time, if we...
No problem at all. Just bear with you guys. Apologies for the sound quality, but there is an issue somewhere along the lines. So if you think about what I've got on the screen here, we've got 4 stages: prospects, qualified opportunities, final decision, and then orders. So if we look at this particular example, this will be different for every organization. We're saying here that you've got to put 20 prospects in the top of your funnel to get 6 qualified opportunities, to get 3 final decisions, to get 1 order. So in principle, what we're saying here is that your sales funnel ratio is 20 to 1. Now, with that, you've got to think about what can I do to change that. Now, you clearly have 2 options. Number 1 is shove more stuff in the top, or you can look to change the levers in that sales process. Now, what most salespeople do is exactly what I said in the first instance, which is shoving stuff right in the top of the funnel and just putting more of the same stuff in without looking through qualified, the final decisions, and trying to change the levers. Because if you can change the ratio, you can change a lot of the results in a much big fashion. Matt, would you just move to the next slide? Maybe I'll try and change my header. I'm going to change my headset. 1 second, guys.
Can you all hear me now? Any better, Matt?
No, it's a similar thing. I think it's a platform. We can hear you, but it's just a little bit.
Okay. Apologies, guys. It's not clearly not the AirPods. It's clearly something else that's going on. Okay. So one of the things that we talk a lot about in a mentor group is this concept of clean, healthy, and sufficient. And one of the things that we know from a lot of the work that we've done with our clients is that if you can get a proper, repeatable process with salespeople, and this is a true statistic from one of our customers as a case study, you can get a 134% increase in pipeline and a 32% increase in opportunities by focusing on these 3 areas. So one of the key questions you've got to ask yourself if you're a seller, or if you're a sales manager, you should be asking your sales teams is your pipeline clean, healthy, or sufficient? So let me explain those elements one by one. First of all, clean. Now we've all seen it. I think we all do it probably. Is when we enter something to our CRM, we put something without a proper close date. And a proper close date is actually having a date. Or one to watch out for is one where we put in the close date at the end of each month. So you'll see things for the 31st of July, for example. Now, what tends to happen is as you progress and mature through the sales pipeline, those dates should get more and more accurate. Be very mindful of watching for opportunities where the late sale of a deal, but the date is still the end of the month. It often means that the data is not accurate. And of course, if data is not accurate, you're not going to get anything proper out the other side and back to the roulette wheel of forecasting. The other things are things like opportunities without any values. It can be as simple as just making sure everybody's asking the question, are these deals right? Are they correct and accurate? Now, if you move over to healthy, the other thing to look at is the spread of deals across the pipeline by stages. So imagine a standard sales pipeline, you may have 5, 6, 7 different stages. If you've got a lot at the very end cycle, you're going to have a problem, maybe not this period, but period after. If you've got a lot of opportunities at the beginning, you might have a problem in actually closing deals. So making sure that you've got a healthy set of opportunities across your pipeline is critical. And what you can do is start to look at things like average time in stage, because if you can pull that lead, you can push them through quickly. And I'll speak about this a bit later on, which is you're looking at the value, the volume, and the velocity of your sales through the pipeline. And then, of course, you've got sufficiency. So for sufficiency, and you can use the ratio that I spoke about earlier to work that out, is if I close these deals, have I got sufficient in my pipeline to be able to close out the period correctly? So clean, healthy, and sufficient. And one of the things that we recommend is that this actually becomes part of a discipline that you do on a regular basis. Some organizations do this weekly, some every other week, and sometimes monthly or even quarterly. But you should be looking and analyzing your pipeline to say and ask those 3 questions. Is my pipeline clean? Is it healthy? And is it sufficient? Matt, next slide, please, if you can hear me.
I can hear you, yeah. Okay.
Very good. Okay. One of the other things I see quite a lot is that in sales, we tend to focus a great deal on lag indicators, where we should be looking at lead indicators. As you see on this page, I've given you some examples of lag indicators and lead indicators. Now, if people that often get confused with, let me make you an analogy. A lot of people here, I'm not happen to be one of them, like soccer. In soccer, we tend to look at the lag indicators. What was the end score? It was 3-1 to Watford or Arsenal, or in that case, Liverpool. That's okay, and it's kind of useful, but it's not useful during the game itself. It's only useful for looking at things retrospectively for the next game or the next period, right? So by able to look at your lead indicators, we're able to actually impact the in-game or in-period opportunities. And often people don't measure these things. They focus very much on the lag indicators. But by being able to really focus in on the lead indicators, we can change what's happening in the period. So, for example, measuring things like the number of meetings, the number of calls people are doing, the number of contacts. And I give you, this is a live statistic that we got recently. Right now in the marketplace, you're going to be looking for up to 6 to 10 different contacts to make one individual sale. Now that depends on the type of sale, clearly, but what we're saying is that it's no longer about having one person as a key contact. It's how many other people have got involved as well. Looking at the opportunity pipe, the opportunity qualification as well. So be able to look at all of those things as lead indicators is critical to your success in the business. Next slide, Matt.
Just a couple of things to add on from your chats here, everybody. Lee, hopefully that's starting to answer some of your questions around when you've got a very long sales pipeline, what else should you be doing? And of course, the close dates are lagging indicators. They're the end of the sales funnel, not purely because, of course, with as a service, that's a continuum now. What James is just describing there is number of contacts, the cadence of meetings, qualitative and quantitative, are all really important when you've got a long sales cycle. And Bob, to your point, what we often see is we're driving a close date by our own inside measures. You know, we need to close it out by a quarter, but actually, when's the customer looking to move? What's their compelling event? And within a fact-based pipeline, we're basing it on what the customer does. Now, of course, we can influence that by generating real high levels of value in our proposition and getting a great sense of urgency. But we should definitely do that with the customer in mind rather than purely our own interests in mind, would be my opinion. So, Bob, good comments in the chat. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Matt. It's good to hear you, although we could see you during that. I should have using my mouth rather than you like a ventriloquist dummy. Okay, so it moves on to this next slide. I spoke about this earlier, which volume, value, and velocity, something that we call the 3 V's. For me, these are the levers that we can pull to really impact the pipeline. So at any time, we salespeople have got these levers that we can pull. We can either change the volume of opportunities we've got in, we can change the value, maybe the sales price, or we can change the velocity, how quickly we can make the deals close. So whenever we're thinking about how we can improve our pipeline or whether we can do anything to change it, always think back these 3 levers, the 3 V's. What can we do to impact the volume? What can we do to impact value? Now, value doesn't always mean discounting, because a lot of organizations, a lot of salespeople will automatically default back to value and discounting to try and push a deal through. The truth of it is we can normally look to increase price when we can add value. And that talks about the solution selling, the consultative sales approach that we should be taking right now, as opposed to transactional. When you're getting down to discounting, that's when you may have a problem of not adding enough value initially. But have a think about what you could do around the value. Now, velocity is interesting. Velocity, the more we get, the quicker we can get things through the pipeline. This speaks to this long sales pipeline. If you can reduce that, and this is about marginal gains across all of them. There's a great story about the Sky cycling team, and what they were able to do was, rather than focusing on the big stuff, big changes, what they're looking to do was make small incremental changes every time. And I tell you, if you can make incremental changes against your volume, value, and velocity in your sales pipe, you will make a major change overall to your revenue. And ultimately, sales is about revenue. Matt, next slide, please. Okay, another challenge that I see a great deal is inconsistent measurement when we're looking at the sales pipeline or the health of your sales organization. And part of the challenge is there are so many different things that we can measure. And what we've done here at Mentor Group recently is we did a scientific factor analysis to work out what are the 7 true metrics that we should be using consistently to be able to measure your sales health. And this is what I'm showing on screen right now. This we call the magic 7. If you're measuring these on a consistent basis, week to week, period on period, whatever you want to do, this is how you can measure consistency to make sure you're always performing. So we talk about sales pipeline coverage. We spoke about that earlier. Have you got sufficiency across your pipeline? What is the average deal size? Can we do anything to change that? What are we getting in terms of sales funnel leakage? Remember my picture earlier of the sales funnel. Where are we getting things falling out of that funnel? Where are we missing? Is it the early stages? Is it the late stages? Where are we getting that funnel leakage? Time to close speaks directly to what I was speaking to in terms of velocity. The conversion rates are back to the sales ratio. The customer acquisition cost, which is interesting because depending on how much it's costing you to acquire a customer, and we all know that acquiring a customer is more expensive than retaining an existing one, this can really change your sales pipeline. So think about the customer acquisition cost. Very frequently we find people do not know the answer to this. Equally, they don't know the answer to number 7, which is the customer lifetime value. Now, we got a bunch of metrics behind here we can give you and share with you, so the algorithm that we've got to calculate these. But to be able to measure these on a consistent basis is the true indicator of the health of your sales pipeline and sales organization as a whole. Next slide, please, Matt. So the key takeaway from this, certainly my side, are these 3 things. One is what we do to move things, what can we identify to kill, and what things we need to identify. Now, kill is quite a strong word, right? But I give you one of my favorite sayings. I was told this very early in my sales career, which is good salespeople qualify in, great salespeople qualify out. And it's a changed mindset, and it comes down to our mental resiliency, because we don't say we're not going to pursue an opportunity because we're very often very keen to dive into getting a sales opportunity. But we also have to be realistic enough to say, I'm not going to put any more of my time into this. It's not going to happen. And so the real, for me, the real trigger is working out what we can kill, not what we can add in. Matt, back to you.
Good, thank you, everybody. And as you're listening to James there, and thank you for persevering with the sound. I know it was a bit Dalek-esque, so thank you for doing that. As you're listening in, and you think about clean, healthy, sufficient. You think about some of the factors you can see on the screen here today. The best part of pipeline management is being honest with where you are as an individual, where you are as a leader, and looking at the data that you're presented with, and then working out how we can move to action pretty quickly. More of that later on. But certainly what we're looking at is that marginal gain. So if one thing has resonated with you in terms of that, if your pipeline's not clean, if you've got close dates that are on the weekend, or they're being driven by your internal thinking rather than the customer's compelling event, then that's a marginal gain that you can change. If you've got a lack of health in your pipeline, by that, enough pipeline opportunities at each stage, maybe you're top heavy, which means you're going to be successful in the future. Maybe you're bottom of the pipeline heavy, which means you're going to be successful sooner, but then you're going to have a lag. Just marginal gains that you can take away from this today. Bill says, be brutally honest. Absolutely. And if your pipeline drops as a result of that, that's okay. Your conversion ratio will likely improve, and then you can work on the gap. So, James, that was great. Thank you very much. What we'll do now is we'll move on to John, who can talk about. So we've understood the data, we've understood the things that we should be looking at. So what do we do with that? What are the actions we should therefore take moving forward? John, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you. Really interesting listening to James and his mention of the Sky cycling team, which cycling is one of my passions, and really interesting around marginal gains, and actually we need to think a little bit about not just the overall performance of your pipeline, but we need to think about the individuals in it. We're dealing with that most unpredictable of subjects, the sales persona, the salesperson, what motivates them, why do they do stuff. And so actually what we've got to think about is customizing our approach to every individual. To build on James's analogy of the Sky team, every one of those guys' saddles, their handlebars, their whole bikes are custom built for them. But more than that, their training programs are customized to them. And I think that's a really important point, because we've got to look at things from a different dimension. We have got to think about this thing that we call emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence from a sales leadership point of view is the critical differentiator. Little fact, 90%, in case you missed that, of the world's top earners report high levels of emotional intelligence. If nothing else, that's something that should grab your attention. And the good news, you can develop it. It's not something you're born with, you can develop it. So what is emotional intelligence? Well, it's simple, it's three things. It's, do you understand yourself? Do you understand the way that you typically, naturally, instinctively coach, lead, and manage your salespeople? That's the first thing. Once you understand that, you can then do the other two things. And the other two things are, do I really understand how each of my salespeople are different? You look at a herd of cows, you might say they're a load of cows. Look at them again, you can see they are all unique. Every cow is unique. Every salesperson is unique. There are little things about them, about the way they work, about the things they do that are different. And because of that, the third skill of emotional intelligence, the ability to adapt, to be that chameleon, to change color in front of the environment, to change the way we coach and lead our salespeople, to increase their pipeline efficiency, has to be different, because the cows are all different. Selling has never been about just one thing. Just like baking, bread, cakes, whatever, you have multiple ingredients that deliver success. We have got to understand what those ingredients are, and to focus our coaching on the thing that will really drive performance efficiency in our pipeline. Attitude, we all know, is the key. Salespeople often have pretty big attitudes in my experience. I know I am one. But what we're going to understand is someone's attitude as they move through the things they do. Add to attitude, aptitude, skills, competencies, whatever you want to call it, your ability to do the job. That, with attitude, is the essential factor. But we have to focus at an activity level. People cannot do the same thing at the same level. Just because I'm good at one point of selling, just because I'm good in one group of customers, just because I'm good in one product set, doesn't mean I'm good at everything. Doesn't mean I've got blind spots. Doesn't mean I'm not motivated or particularly want to do something. Just because I'm a good rower doesn't make me a good rower on the sea. So we look at this in three dimensions, and those three dimensions are really simple. My attitude is to simplify everything, keep things really easy, work in threes, because I can only remember three things. If I'm coaching someone, I need to think about these three things. I need to think about the activity. What is it they need to do to increase their pipeline, to validate their pipeline, to make it cleaner, to make it more healthy? What is it they need to do? What type of customers are they engaging with? What conversations are they having? What products are they engaged with? What solutions are they engaged with? Which part of the sales stage are they focused at? And if I understand the activity, I can then start to think about the other two factors. I can then start to think about their aptitude. Can they do this? Have they done it before? Have they demonstrated the success in this? Or is this something they've never done before? Is it completely new? Is it something that they're actually not confident with? because that then leads us down to that attitude piece. What is their motivation? Do they want to do this? Do they see a value in it? Are they committed? Are they enthusiastic? Are they too enthusiastic? Are they a bit gung-ho and flying into this without actually thinking about it? We've got to think about things in 3 dimensions. As leaders, we have to think about the activity that we're asking people to do. What is it that they need to do? Back to James's point about lead measures. What are the things we need them to do to deliver the lag? We need to think about their aptitude, their their competency, their skills, their knowledge. Can they do the job? And they need to think about attitude, their motivation, their willingness, their eagerness, their reluctance, whatever it is, to actually do that activity. That's what really differentiates. And what we can do, we can be a bit scientific with this. We can actually think about, okay, what are the indicators that tell me where their aptitude and attitude is, and what tactics can I deploy? If I think about someone with really great aptitude, that's your rock stars, your people that can do this job. They know how to do it. They have proved it before. They crack on and they deliver the plan. Then you know they've got capacity for more. So what do we do as leaders? Well, frankly, the best thing you can do is get out of their way. Allow them to determine their goals and objectives. Allow them to come up with the ideas of problems. If they're getting stuck somewhere in their pipeline, you should expect them to solve it themselves. Most importantly, give them that autonomy. We think at the other end of that spectrum, though, someone perhaps who hasn't got that aptitude, those skills, that knowledge. They maybe have not done anything like it before. They've not delivered results before. Maybe they've failed. Maybe the results, they're getting stuck. Things are getting stuck in their pipeline, or there's a problem. And maybe they're at the limit of their capacity. They can't do any more. So what should we do? What are our tactics? Well, this is where we really earn our corn as sales leaders. We need to instruct and train them. We need to guide. We need to coach. We need to show them how. We need to solve problems for them. This is where we need to get out and be on calls with them. This is where they need closer monitoring. So 2 different styles of leadership there. Let them go, let them be empowered, be close, monitor, coach, and train. Let's look at attitude. Let's think about those with the great attitude, those that just crack on and get things done. They're eager, they're enthusiastic, confident and committed, optimistic about the outcome. They say, yes, boss, I can get this done. Let's get going. Love to have lots of these in our organization, but you know what? They need careful managing. We've got to reward and recognize. When they do stuff, we've got to make sure that they're recognized. We're not going to blow smoke. Right? We're not going to go over the top. We just give them appropriate recognition. We might use them as a reference point, maybe someone that's struggling as a best practice. We might use them to coach and support somebody maybe who's got lower levels of aptitude. But most importantly, we should be challenging them to do more. And then let's think about those folk that maybe are down in the dumps, are the perhaps people who've got the negative attitude. Maybe it's not. Maybe they're just hesitant and nervous. Maybe they just don't know how. They're just a bit reluctant. Maybe they've had some failures. Maybe they're just putting things off. They're procrastinating. Maybe they're blaming everyone else. Maybe they're blaming you. Maybe I'll never get the leads from marketing. Maybe they're finding lots of excuses. Maybe they have self-doubt about their own capability. What do we do? Well, simply put, there's things we can do, some tactics. Clearly here, motivation, encouragement, reassurance. One of the things we can do to help them is breaking things down, make them into smaller activities, giving them smaller goals to achieve. And again, though, we need to have a higher frequency of contact. They need more positive strokes to have that confidence and attitude. Now, of course, none of this actually starts to dip into when things are going really off track and we have to tighten things up from a performance management point of view. This talks about the general conversational approach we need to have in managing our people. Aptitude, attitude, activity, indicators, tactics, we've got to mix and match. And just as a final point, I'm not all psychoanalysis on you, that we have to understand that every individual that works for us is a unique human being. Some will have different drivers of behaviors. The brain is very neatly divided for us now from the studies of neurology. We know that different zonal areas drive different behaviors. We've all have two of these areas that dominate our behavioral preferences. We have those people who, highly analytical, who love to be right, who will take time to be right. Maybe they'll be overly cautious. Maybe they'll be overly detailed. On the other side, we've got the expressive time over, these are the creative people, attention span that's incredibly short, drawn to the bright, shiny lights and will never see things through to conclusions. They're happy with being first at something and being entertained and interested. The other side, quite often in salespeople, we get the win most of competitive people. I've got to get things done, got to be challenging, got to be forceful, decisive, and win at all costs. This isn't necessarily the most helpful behavior for salespeople. If we're managing customers, we're managing customer relationships, actually achieving sales that aren't right for the customer will damage you in the long run. And then finally, we've got the harmonious type. Considerate, want to consult with everybody, very cautious, not big on change. And we need to make sure that whoever the individual is in front of us, we are thinking not just about the 3 A's, the activity, the aptitude, and the attitude. We're also thinking about the individual and how do they need to be coached. Hope that's been useful. Matt, over to you.
We're dealing with people as leaders, we're people as sellers. We've all been through an enormous amount of change over the last 20 months. Sometimes we have to think about, as a leader, are we driving fictional pipelines through the way that we coach, lead, and manage? Are we getting people to hide opportunities? They're not in the sales funnel too soon because they think they're going to be asked about them, possibly. Are we over indexing on the ones that are in there, so people leave them in there even though they might not be winnable, possibly again? So based on what you're showing on here, and as a leader, we also have to think about the way that we are coaching, leading, managing our people so that we're driving factional pipelines. Just one question, James, I'm going to pose to you in just a second. Bob, you put there a key role for sales managers, forcing salespeople to provide evidence that justifies qualification. It's very much an inside-out way of thinking. We've got to think about it from the customer's perspective. So the question for you, James, is should we be thinking about it from the buyer stage rather than the sales stage?
I think the answer, Matt, is absolutely. Just looking at a comment there from GD4, I think I'll just call you GD4 because it's a shorter number. You're absolutely right. So the customer does not care about our sales process. What they care about is our buying process. And often if you look at all of our language from sales, we always talk about sales process. We don't give enough to think about the buyer process. Now, one of the interesting developments, particularly over the last couple of years, is how that buying process is changing and is going to continue to change. And part of our challenges is trying to work out how to make sure that we're meeting the client's buying need as opposed to our selling needs. And far too often I see organizations that are building structures, procedures, frameworks, blueprints that are based around our sales process, not the customer's buying cycle. And what we need to do is, first stage is to think about aligning them. Where can we align them? But I also believe that we need to move beyond this linear concept of a sale going just straight through a sales process, because that's not genuinely how buyers buy. And equally, this slide particularly is interesting because different people on here will buy in different ways. So where we might say, well, we need to give them a demonstration first as part of an early part of that sales process. For a lot of people, particularly the analyticals, they're not interested in seeing a demo and speaking to a salesperson. What they need is what we might do later on, which is technical specifications, something that they can really delve into. So we need to be able to be, right back to John's point about being adaptable. We don't just need to adapt ourselves, but we need to be adaptable around our sales process to meet the buyer's needs. And that has to be the central part of any project. Thanks, Matt.
Great.
Yeah, and then to just pick it up from Bob's point, it's exactly what I was just saying. It is a non-linear journey. I prefer to think of, I say this quite frequently, it's not a sales process, it's a sales map. Now with a map, I could get to Matt's house 5 or 6 different ones. There's not a correct way. It's only the correct way for me as the individual to either avoid traffic, stay on motorways, to go to the scenic route. We cannot think of things as you know, the spaghetti bowl diagram is right, but I've got to think of it more like a map. I'm interested to get to the destination. What I need to work out is what is the right pit stops to take to get me to that destination. Thanks, Bob.
Very good. So let me pull all this together for us, as we got about just over 5 minutes to go. So how do we systemize this? Well, in any kind of system, it has to be a repeated pattern of events. So we've already talked a little bit about the fact that in good pipeline management, we need data, no question about that. We need data in everything that we do, in all aspects of life now. Particularly in pipeline, we need good quality data that's clean, healthy, and sufficient. Once we've got those factors covered, we can then derive insight from it. So what's it telling us about what's going on in the world of our sales team or the individual seller? What do we need to be doing differently moving forward? And that's the action piece. And that's the important piece, because once we understand the gap and what we need to do, we can then go and do something with it based on the customer, based on the customer's buying process. So that's the flow, and it's continuous. So how do we do that? Well, let's think really about building a cadence. So I'm sure we've all experienced over the years where you've had maybe a coaching session, or you've been the coach and you've done the coaching session, and then 3 weeks later you do another one, and then 7 weeks later you do another one. Well, that doesn't work in pipeline management. We have to have a regular pattern because it drives the right behavior. Let me tell you what I mean by that. So let's say I've got a forecast which is going to close out within this quarter, and I'm on week 1. If I know I'm going to have a regular weekly call, one-to-one with my manager over the course of the next 12 weeks, and I know my manager is going to ask me similar questions around the customer's business needs, around the stakeholders, around their KPIs, and a number of other areas, I'm going to go away and find that information out. Now, if I know that's going to happen every week, it rapidly drives the right kind of behaviors for me to do the right kind of activities with the customer, data to insight to the right kind of activities. If I'm not doing that on a regular cadence, I can maybe get away with not asking those questions. So actually, in a positive sense, a regular cadence builds a regular pipeline. And we can look at this in a number of ways. So here's just 4 types of meetings that you could have with your team or with your individuals within your team. The funnel review is about making sure that the data in your CRM is clean and healthy, that you've got all the right close dates in there, that you've got the right sales stages, the right values, the right contact information. But if you build a cadence into your way of working around a funnel, looking at that, very quickly you can clean your pipeline up fast. And by that, then we're not having those awkward conversations around the quality of data in your pipeline, because no one likes that. It wastes time, doesn't it? A one-to-one pipeline review is looking at everything outside of your reporting quarter or month or whatever it may be for you. Because quite often, if we're looking at forecast, which is the business which is going to close within the current reporting time frame, and we try to do a pipeline review within that meeting, you only ever get one winner. And that is, what's the number going to be? When are we going to close it out? By separating them out, you drive more health within your pipeline. But again, keep the cadence relative to what it is in your business. Someone was mentioning earlier, if you've got a sales cycle of 18 months, 2 years, you wouldn't have a pipeline review every 2 weeks. You'd probably have it every 2 months as you drive new top of the funnel activity. So you have a separate meeting for pipeline, a separate meeting for a forecast and commit review. And crucially, you then have team learning huddles, which can focus on win reports, loss reports, market conditions, a number of other things. But if you implement those in a way that's going to drive consistency, you get consistent behavior, you get a consistency of driving the EQ that John was talking about, and of course, the stuff that James was talking about earlier on. All those factors really go together. So this image just shows you that if you step back as a leader and you think about the kind of meetings you're having within your organization today, are you separating out pipeline and forecast? Are you driving the right questions in your individual meetings to drive a fact-based pipeline? Are you using best practices around coaching in order to achieve that. So as we get towards the end of our time together today, here's a conclusion. Process and execution best practices. You need three types of intelligence. You need IQ. What do we mean by that? Well, IQ is we need to understand our customer, their market sector, their requirements, their needs, the differing needs of different stakeholders. We need knowledge in order to be able to build a good pipeline. We need EQ, emotional intelligence. John talked about this. In sales, we've got to adapt to the customer because that's the right thing to do. We've got to change our approach based on the buyer and their KPIs. So we've got to have emotional intelligence. And then we've got to do things on a consistent basis. That's XQ, that's process or execution quotient, process intelligence. Do something well on a repeated pattern of behavior and the results will follow. They'll build a fact-based pipeline, which is going to make you more successful more often. So as we're coming towards the end of our time together today, I'm thinking, what's your marginal gain? What one thing would you take away from the time that we spent together today? I know what my one thing will be. Don't go to the dentist 3 hours before a webinar. But what would be your one marginal gain that you would take away? If you want to put it in the chat, feel free to do so. If you want to reflect on that and think about the 3 areas that we covered in the agenda, please do so. We are open to questions, so I'll pause for a moment and just see if there's any more questions coming in through the chat. I think we've covered most of them already. John, James, if you can come back on, we'll see if any questions come in. While we're waiting for the questions, and if you're pushed for time, I will say to you, if you want any more information, you want to chat to me personally around these things, my email address is on screen now. If you send me an email, I'll send you a list of areas around clean, healthy, and sufficient that your organization should be considering. James, you pulled that together for us?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's all there.
Yeah. And if you are pushed for time, we thank you for joining us today. It's great to have so many people on. Hopefully you've taken something away that's either going to help you or your organization. That's our intention. That's our intent always. So thank you for your time. And we look forward to seeing you on another webinar that we'll be doing towards the end of January.
Matt, there's a question in there from Helton.
Helton, okay, let's see. Hey, Travis is on. It's good to see you, Travis. Let's see. Helton's question. Love the idea of experienced cadence driving high performance, but sometimes it's hard to engage my clients' managers in that. Any tips concerning engagement? Yeah, the research backs it up, Helton, from the perspective of driving consistent behaviors, drives clean, healthy, sufficient pipelines, for one thing. It drives better data and analytics within the CRM, but there's also research that shows it retains key talent. So if you think about what's going to be difficult over the next year, what CROs thinking about? They're thinking about growth, they're thinking about an increased portfolio, and crucially, they're thinking about keeping the key talent within their organization. So by implementing a system that's going to drive a coaching culture, you can tick all 3 of those off. Tony, thank you. I see you're going. Peter, thank you as well. James, John, anything to add to finish off?
Right for me.
So thank you, Matt.
Brilliant. So stay safe, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out. As you can see, if you want any more information, please do email me. And wish you a good rest of December, good holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you again in the new year.